maybe creatine just isn't for people with IBS. And I see this a lot, and I can understand why people reach that conclusion. You know, they try creatine, they bloat, they feel sick, their stomach kicks off like a 3-year-old having a tantrum in a toy shop. So they go, right, that's it. Obviously, I can't tolerate any supplements. Not that I'm saying that you should take supplements. And that seems to make sense. You know, stopping something that makes you feel worse is a good idea. But that isn't the full picture. And before we even talk about creatine, I just want to zoom out for a second. So supplements aren't risk-free, and they're not automatically useful for everyone, despite what some people might think. So it's a matter of being savvy when it comes to using supplements, and being savvy with supplements simply means that you don't want to waste money on something that's not doing anything, because that would be pointless. You understandably don't want to make your IBS symptoms worse because you piled a load of supplements on top of shaky basics. You don't want to skip the obvious basics and then try and chase performance on top of chaos. There'd be no point chasing performance if you haven't got the basics right first, because that would be like trying to build a house on sand without any foundations. And then also you want to protect your health. Protecting your health is obviously important, but unfortunately a lot of people take it for granted until it's too late. So you want to protect your health because supplements can interact with medications, and that's not just prescription, that's both prescription and over-the-counter medications. But then also it can interact with other nutrients and other ingredients within various products like nutritional supplements, sports supplements and herbal remedies. And then on top of that, you can also double up on nutrients that you're already getting from food or other supplements that you might be taking. And exceeding the recommended doses of nutrients, especially supplemental, has consequences. And so it'd be wise to know what you are taking and how much. And supplements can be contaminated and contain ingredients that could cause you some mild to nasty side effects. And they can contain ingredients that aren't even listed on the label. What? And when you've got IBS, this adds another layer to consider, because certain ingredients and certain formats of these supplements can also trigger gut symptoms. So if someone does decide to use a supplement, it should only ever be after the need, the risks and the consequences have been properly thought through. Not because someone on social media like Instagram or Facebook or wherever, not because they said so, not because a celebrity is using it, not because a celebrity is promoting it, and not because your mate at the gym or work, not because they swear by it, and not because it's labelled as natural or for performance or for gut health. And this applies to everyone regardless of whether or not they have IBS. So the better question isn't what supplement should I take, like it's a pick and mix. The best question to ask yourself or to get help with is, do I need one? Is it worth it? And how do I reduce the risk? So that need, risk, consequence way of thinking is exactly how sports nutrition bodies frame it for athletes, although this applies to everyone. And if you do take this approach with supplements, you can reduce risk, avoid wasting money on things you don't need or that don't actually work, because that would be really pointless and really annoying, and only invest in things that actually has a proven benefit and will benefit you personally without compromising your health as well. And one reason this is important is the supplement industry itself, and most people don't realise that supplements aren't regulated like medicines. And regulation varies from country to country, and the same ingredient can be classified differently depending on where you live in the world. And that doesn't mean that every supplement is dodgy, although clearly there's a lot of dodgy supplements out there. It just means that responsibility falls on you to choose wisely. And because something is legal and widely sold, it doesn't mean that it's risk-free, that it's necessary for you or appropriate for you personally. And also natural doesn't mean that it's safe and risk-free either. This is where batch testing comes in, because it means that the product has been independently checked for quality, contamination, and that it actually contains what it says on the label. Not because it makes the product perfect or anything like that, but it can help to reduce the risks. But obviously there is no 100% guarantee, because no test and program can test for everything. So if you are going to use a supplement, picking a third-party tested product is a good idea. And yes, you may pay a little bit more for that product, but I know myself, I would rather pay more for that peace of mind, even though, like I said, there is no 100% guarantees. And only using products that have been batch tested isn't just for elite athletes or, you know, for people in the military, because you know, it's for everyone. And a lot of people think, oh yeah, I'm not an athlete, or I'm not in the military, or I'm not in the army, that doesn't apply to me. Well, it does. It applies to everyone. And by the way, just because a product is batch tested, it doesn't mean that it is effective. And this catches a lot of guys out, and I've come across this a lot, because there's lots of products that have been batch tested, but they lack the quality scientific evidence to support their use. So right, let's go back to creatine. So why would someone think about and consider using creatine in the first place? Well, the strongest evidence is around improving strength, power, and repeated high intensity exercise performance. And creatine is one of the most researched supplements that we have, specifically creatine monohydrate though. And there are other forms, there's loads of them, like creatine hydrochloride, or HCl for short, ethyl ester, nitrate, and buffered versions, but these don't have the same amount of evidence or quality of evidence behind them as the monohydrate has. And when you look at the research, creatine monohydrate is the form that's been studied the most. It's got decades of research behind it showing that it's effective and safe. And these other forms of creatine, they haven't been shown to outperform monohydrate, and they don't have the same depth of evidence, and they don't have the same depth of long-term safety data either. And they usually cost more than the monohydrate as well. So from the evidence perspective, monohydrate is the logical starting point. So if someone is going to use creatine at all, the monohydrate would be the one to choose. So when you see claims like, this one is easy on the stomach, or this one is better tolerated, this one is more absorbable, all that kind of stuff, a lot of that is marketing and word of mouth anecdotes and not solid evidence. And that doesn't mean that people don't feel different on different products, because obviously they do, everyone's different. It just means that the reason someone feels better or worse on a product is usually more complicated, and there could be other things going on. So now the spicy bit. So the gut symptoms. So people often assume if creatine gives me gut symptoms, it must be toxic, or my body just can't handle it. But that's not what the research actually shows. And in controlled studies, gut symptoms like nausea, bloating, stomach pains, and diarrhea often show up at similar rates in the creatine group as the placebo. So in other words, people taking the dummy supplement, the placebo, often report similar gut symptoms as people taking the creatine. And by the way, that's in people without IBS. These are the so-called healthy participants who still experience gut symptoms. The strongest data we have really drives this home. So in a recent 2025 safety analysis of creatine supplementation, researchers pooled together 685 randomized controlled trials using 26,000 people, and they looked specifically at side effects, and they found no significant difference in how often gut symptoms occurred between creatine and placebo overall, and around 5.5% of people taking creatine reported gut symptoms compared to 4.2% taking placebo, which isn't statistically or clinically significant. So while there's some individual studies that have reported gut symptoms, when you look at the bigger picture, most people don't have any issues. And when they do happen, they're usually mild. Where gut issues do tend to show up is with the dose and dosing pattern, and studies consistently show that taking large single doses, usually about 10 grams or more in one go, is much more likely to cause diarrhea or stomach upset than splitting the dose. And that's because the unabsorbed creatine can pull water into the gut and then speed things up. And this matches what I see in practice. And when guys feel sick, I've been taking creatine and I'm feeling really sick, it's usually when they've been loading or been taking big doses. And that's exactly what happened to Glenn, my husband and partner. And if you've been following us, you know that Glenn also has IBS. And when he's felt sick and yucky, it's because he's took 10 grams or more in one go, whereas I can tolerate that dose without any drama, so I'm okay. But it's the same supplement, but just different guts. And that's an important point. The research shows that doses of around 10 grams or more at once can trigger gut symptoms even in people without IBS. And another piece that often gets missed is what else is going on at the same time. And some studies show that gut symptoms may not be caused by creatine itself at all. And it could be the other ingredients that's in the product. It could be manufacturing byproducts. It could be contaminants in certain supplements, especially if you're not buying batch tested products. And this makes it a purity and quality issue, not a creatine issue. So again, this reinforces, like I said, only using batch tested products. And if someone has IBS, they've already got a sensitive gut, so it could tip things over the edge. And then there's caffeine. Not that I'm going to go into this right now, but just to mention, to highlight some things to think about. So a lot of people don't take creatine on its own. Some people take it with coffee. They take it with a pre-workout or as part of a pre-workout. They take it alongside energy drinks or fat burners, and obviously with their normal food. And any one of these or even several of these could be triggering gut symptoms. So it might not be the creatine, it could be one of the other things that they're having as well. And caffeine on its own can speed up gut movement, and some people can end up with diarrhea. And caffeine doses are important as well, just to mention, not only for the performance benefits, but also because of gut symptoms and then the risk to health, because high amounts of caffeine can be fatal, although rare. So the safe dose for most adults is about 400 milligrams per day, which is about 4 or 5 cups of regular instant coffee. And then when you've got creatine stacked with caffeine, especially at high doses, then that combination could increase the chance of stomach pains or diarrhea for some people. And that doesn't mean that that combo is dangerous. It just means that it's down to individual tolerance. And then on top of that, exercise can also lead to gut symptoms, depending on the type and intensity of the exercise, regardless of the supplements. So things like running, high impact or high intensity training are well known to trigger what people call runner's trots or exercise induced GI distress. And this is due to various reasons, but it could be jostling, dehydration, stress, hormones, all of those can contribute. So sometimes creatine gets blamed when really it's not, and it could be other things that are happening. So when someone with IBS reacts to creatine, it might not be the creatine that's dangerous or toxic, because research consistently shows that monohydrate is safe for most people when it's used appropriately. What usually matters is how the gut experiences it and what else is going on. And this is where IBS changes the rules. So some people do get gut symptoms, and with IBS, those sensations can feel more uncomfortable, and expectations can play a role as well. So if you're bracing for trouble and you're thinking that you're going to get symptoms, those negative expectations about taking creatine can trigger symptoms. And with IBS, the gut is more sensitive, so everyday digestive activity that someone else, barely notices, these can feel more intense and painful when you've got IBS. And this is where a lot of unhelpful advice shows up online. And I see things like, just have an IBS, most things won't be for you. Or if your gut gets upset, you get stomach pains or gut symptoms, just avoid it forever. Well, comments like that aren't exactly helpful, and they're not true either. Someone with IBS often already feels like their life is limited, and they don't need people putting them down or kicking them down when they're already down and saying rubbishy, unhelpful stuff like that. Advice like that doesn't help them move forward. It takes options off the table and reinforces that their body is broken when actually it's not. So now the practical part. If someone with IBS feels rough on creatine, here's some things to consider. So number one, the dose size, like I mentioned earlier, a big dose in one go is the most common reason for feeling sick or nauseous and getting symptoms. Number two, how you split it. So smaller doses across the day are better tolerated typically, rather than trying to chug it down in one go. Like if you're wanting to do a loading phase, rather than tanning the whole 20 grams in one go, like I've seen quite a few guys do, it's best to break it down into 4 lots of 5-gram portions throughout the day. Number three, formulation and format, like powder versus capsules, and then also effervescent or the fizzy versions. These can be a nightmare with IBS because of the gas and the bloating. Number four, what else is in the product? A pure monohydrate product is one thing, but having other supplements like pre-workouts or protein shakes, These can contain possible triggers like sweeteners, magnesium, caffeine, beta-alanine and bicarbonate, for example. And lots of products contain proprietary blends, so they don't have to list the individual ingredient amounts within it, so you can be left guessing. Plus, if you've chosen a product that's not batch tested, it could contain other ingredients which may cause symptoms or side effects. 5, quality assurance. Again, using third-party products reduces risk of contamination and dodgy surprises. Number 6, track it properly. So if you change 5 things all at once, you won't know what caused what. So if you're going to try creatine, then log the dose, time and exercise and any symptoms to see its effects. And then now I'm going to move on to quickly about the carnivore advice I keep coming across, which on one hand does seem to make sense because creatine is naturally found in meat, for example, but it's in smaller amounts than what's in the supplements. And I've seen people's social posts about this where they've basically recommending to totally sack the supplements and just go all in on the carnivore diet. And I like the food first approach because it prioritizes food over supplements, but the carnivore diet is so extreme and it's totally ridiculous. If you're following a vegetarian or vegan diet, it's nuts. So yes, some people going low fiber and low fermentable carbs can reduce symptoms, but symptom reduction isn't the same thing as long-term gut health or overall health. So I wouldn't recommend long-term low fiber or low fermentable carbs. And obviously the carnivore diet cuts out whole food groups, and that always comes with trade-offs. So cutting out like fruits, vegetables, beans, pulses, whole grains, you're going to be cutting out various micronutrients like vitamins and minerals, plus you're missing out on fibre by going carnivore. And the fibre is important because your gut bacteria rely on it, and different fibres from different food sources helps increase the diversity of the gut bugs that naturally live in your gut. And they have loads of important roles, numerous roles within the body for your health and well-being. And a diet high in fibre is also linked to a lower risk of constipation and several long-term health conditions like heart disease and type 2 diabetes. So when you strip the diet back to the carnivore diet, like the meat, fish, seafood, poultry, maybe some eggs and sometimes dairy, depending on what version you're looking at, you're not doing your gut bugs any favours, and you're not supporting your long-term health either. And also there's no robust, high quality scientific evidence to support the carnivore diet or the long-term consequences of following it. So I'm not saying never do it, because it's your life, your choice. You get to decide what you eat and what supplements you take. But I'd like you to be able to make an informed decision. And that's why I share this stuff with you, so you can make informed decisions. But what I am saying is don't confuse my symptoms calmed down with I fixed everything forever, because they're two very different things. So back to creatine again. So feeling bloated, gassy, or noticing more gut movement doesn't automatically mean that creatine isn't for you. Often it means that the dose is too high for now. It could be that you washed it down with shed loads of liquid, so it's the volume of the liquid that's making you feel a bit queasy and bloated and not the creatine itself. Was it taken in a way that didn't suit your gut? Like, was it the fizzy effervescent version? The product had extra ingredients, so was it creatine plus X, Y and Z that you were taking? And your nervous system and gut was already on high alert perhaps? Or was it something else that you've eaten earlier that day or even the day before, depending on when you get the symptoms? So IBS management isn't about banning everything, thank goodness, and that's not required either. You don't need to just try and live off something like boiled chicken and plain rice and that's it, phew, because that would be really boring. And also it doesn't give your body everything that it needs to function properly. So it's about understanding your gut and adjusting intelligently and getting proper help when you need it, because all of this can be a minefield, let alone when you've got IBS in the mix as well. So thanks for watching, and if you've got a topic that you'd like to be covered, you can email us at hello@mensibsmastery.com, and I'll catch you next time.